Hey guys, Josh here. So one of the games I was really looking forward to playing this year was Monster Harvest. Originally planned to release in May, it got repeatedly pushed back week after week, but it finally came out a few days ago on August 31st. The publisher sent me a review key, so I've actually been able to play for a bit more than a week, and I feel like now I've played enough to give you my honest thoughts on the game. So in Monster Harvest, you'll get to choose between 4 slightly different characters, and then you receive a letter from your uncle who has a farm, and he recently discovered slime, which basically allows plants to transform into creatures called planimals. And so your uncle decides to set up a laboratory around which a town called Planimal Point was created. So he invites you to take care of his farm as he's getting busy with his scientific projects. So a bit later after your arrival, you'll also find out that there's some company called Slimeco who's also very interested in your uncle's discovery of slime. However, instead of using it to make some cute creatures, they are using it to generate electricity. So they're being portrayed as this kind of evil company, and as you play the game and you progress to the main story, you'll find out more about them. So it's a very simple plot, as it is most of the time with farming games, so I don't have anything bad to say about this. And it introduces us to the world of the game and its most defining mechanics, which are the planimals. Actually, Monster Harvest comes with tons of great ideas to bring variety and novelty to the farming sim genre, which is so welcome as these games are becoming more and more popular. I feel like the newcomers really do need to stand out if they want to get a chance at being successful. There are 3 seasons in the game: dry, wet, and dark, and they all have their own unique atmosphere and colors, and it's pretty interesting to see something different than just the typical spring, summer, autumn, and winter. In each season, you'll be able to grow 4 different crops in addition to some hybrid crops. And if you apply slime to these crops, which you'll get either by slaying slimes with your sword or buying them directly from the slime shop, you'll be able to get some planimal once the crop is ready to harvest. And also, if you're impatient, you can also apply green slime on your plant, which will make it grow instantly. There's a great variety of planimals you can get, each with a unique appearance and slightly different stats, but I'll talk more about that in just a minute. For now, let's just keep going with something positive. One thing I really liked is how the game deals with the day and night cycle. Sometimes in farming sims you feel rushed as time goes too fast, or sometimes you can feel bored if time goes too slow. In Monster Harvest, they fix that problem because the day split into 2 phases, morning and evening, and you have total control over it. So you can take however long you'd like to do all of your chores in the morning, and whenever you're ready to continue, you just go to bed, and then you'll get the option to either sleep until the evening or until the next day. If you sleep until the evening, you will retrieve a tiny bit of your energy and you'll be able to either continue farming or do whatever you want, or you could also go fishing for some fish that only appears at night. Or most importantly, you can go to the dungeon. Located north of Planimal Point, the dungeon is only accessible at night, and it's important to go there every night or just as much as possible, because the dungeon is where you'll be able to get ores, which is necessary for crafting and upgrading your tools, and that's also how you'll be able to fight some monsters and level up your planimals. The dungeon is procedurally generated, so while it is technically different every time, it does feel exactly the same every time. In each room, you'll typically find a monster, and upon touching the monster, you'll enter a battle with your planimal. You can also hit the monster with your sword before it touches you, so this will let your planimal strike first, giving you a slight advantage in combat. So now it's time to talk about the combat, what seems to be one of Monster Harvest's unique selling points. It takes inspiration from the Pokemon turn-based combat system, which is already pretty simple, but it simplifies it even more, maybe a little bit too much. There are no elements, no types, or anything that would involve some kind of strategy. Each planimal has 3 abilities, a regular attack, plus 2 other skills that would either be like a stronger attack, or something like heal, or something to drain the enemy's HP. And most battles will consist of pretty much just mashing the regular attack until the enemy dies, all while watching the frame rate dramatically drop, at least on the Nintendo Switch. After each battle, your planimal will get some experience, and when it levels up, it will replenish its HP and get a little bit stronger. If the enemy happens to be stronger than your planimal, or if your planimal starts a fight with low HP and it dies, the next planimal in your roster will jump in and continue the fight, but basically the combat is always just one-on-one, so 1 monster and 1 planimal. You cannot have more than 1 planimal fight at a time. So pretty much the only kind of strategy involved is just changing the order of the planimals in your roster. So when one of them has low HP, you're gonna want to put one with higher HP and things like that. So there's no real strategy or thinking involved in the fighting and in the dungeon, so that's a little bit of a disappointment. And also, having your planimals die is a normal part of the process, and it's not all bad. And I think that's a really good idea, actually. So every time one of your planimal dies, you will actually get some hearts. And these hearts can then be used to increase your soil level, which in turn will increase the starting level of your planimals. So this means that at the beginning of the game, all of your planimals will start at level 1, but once you've increased your soil to level 10, for example, then all of your new planimals will start at level 10. This means that every time one of your planimal dies, it's a little sacrifice that will make you stronger in the long run, and I think that's a great idea and makes every run to the dungeon with new planimals a little bit easier. Anyway, let's go back to the dungeon. So you'll get to do these battles in each room and gather some ores and materials. And at the end of each floor, there's going to be a treasure. Usually it contains 9 seeds and some other items and a monster to beat. And then once you've beaten the monster and collected the treasure, you can go on to the next floor where you'll encounter stronger monsters. Every night, you'll have to restart from the first floor, and trust me, while the dungeon seems kind of fun at first, it gets very, very repetitive. It seems like the way to progress in the main story is to get to the bottom of the dungeon, and I have no idea how many floors it has, but I pretty much gave up after 4. On the 4th floor, monsters started to be a little bit stronger than my planimals, and I had just no motivation to grind and keep doing the same thing over and over again to level them up. They made combat such a central feature of this game, but for some reason I just could not find much interesting in this combat system, and in the end I was just trying to get deeper in the dungeon by avoiding all the monsters and just running around and try to go and clear it as quickly as I could. Which I assume was probably not the developers' intentions when they made this whole dungeon system. So I gave up on the dungeon and instead I focused on completing the collections, which I managed to finish on the 2nd day of the Dark season, which is the 3rd and last season of the year. It reminded me of Stardew Valley's community center in a way, but simplified to the same degree that the combat was simplified from Pokemon. There are different collections, such as flowers, fish, seasonal crops, and you have to sell one of each item in the collection in order to complete it. All the items required to complete a collection are pretty simple to find, and it doesn't pose much of an interesting challenge. Anyway, once a collection is done, you'll get a perk, most of them making your tools a little bit more efficient, which means they'll require less stamina. Oh, by the way, did I mention that the stamina depletes very quickly in this game? Well, it does, and the efficient tools also didn't seem to make much of a difference. Besides the tools, one of the perks you can get for completing a collection is a farm expansion, which doubles the size of your farm, which is pretty nice, and actually this new part of the farm looks pretty good. However, the problem is I barely used a quarter of my original land, so I have no idea what I would do with that much space. You can, of course, decorate, or you can just keep planting the same 4 crops, but after a while it just feels pointless with no incentive to do pretty much anything. There's a few interesting things you can do with the farming. For example, you can build some irrigation systems that are gonna water your crops automatically. You can also place down some scarecrows to scare the monsters. But there's no like quality levels for your crops. So, you know, sometimes in farming games, you'll have like a 10-star crops or like a higher quality. So you're kind of incentivized to grow the same crops and try to get them better and improve on things. But here, it just feels like there's really no incentive to do much farming once you've got all the different planimals that you want to get. So that felt a little bit disappointing for me. And also you can get livestock in Monster Harvest. Basically, all crops on which you apply blue slime will mutate into a livestock planimal. So before you can get livestock, however, you're gonna have to build a barn, which requires some stone and lumber, which you can get. Actually, there's gonna be lots of trees you can chop on your farm and some stones you can get. And so after the barn is built and you have livestock, you're gonna get food that will actually spawn in the barn automatically. You don't need to collect or buy the food anywhere. It just magically appears in the barn in infinite quantity. So you're just gonna have to pick it up and place it in the little box for each planimal. But anyway, so all livestock will start as babies and eventually they're gonna grow to give you some items every day. However, they seem to remain babies for a very long time, maybe over a month. So I didn't get the chance to actually see my planimals grow as I stopped playing before that happened. I just found it odd how you have an infinite amount of food for that livestock, I think, anyway, you get my point. The farming aspect in this game is a little bit underwhelming. But it's okay because farming is not all there is to a farming game, right? There's also relationships and festivals and more. So in most farming games, relationships play a pretty important part. It feels like the developers wanted that to be a thing in Monster Harvest as well, as when you chat with the villagers, you're going to see a little heart icon, and you can also give them gifts every day to increase your friendship with them faster. The problem, however, is that, first of all, for some reason, everyone in Planimal Point looks super sketchy. I don't know if it's just me. Let me know in the comments if you like these characters, but I couldn't really get attached to any of these characters and they creeped me out a little bit. And the dialogue is very generic and the game doesn't do much to make me interested in these characters. They feel a bit bland and I'm not sure what kind of rewards you would get for befriending them. If you even get anything, I don't think you can marry in this game, so it's really just a friendship. I don't know, in the time that I've played the game, I didn't get any rewards, I didn't feel anything, I didn't feel attached to these characters, so pretty much just like the combat and the farming, the relationships were a little bit underwhelming as well. But it's okay because another staple of the farming sim genre is festivals, right? Well, in Monster Harvest, you'll have the typical fishing festival, livestock festivals, and all the other ones. There's, I think, 2 festivals per month, so it's quite a lot. Actually, there's 21 days per month in this game, so each month is 3 weeks. And actually, I have to say I really liked this space because it feels like the seasons were changing constantly, and yeah, I really enjoyed that. But the problem is there's nothing to do during these festivals. So you'll speak with everyone, they're gonna chat a little bit about what's happening. There's going to be a stall where you can buy some seeds and the same furniture every single time. And yeah, that's it. Each festival will have different decor. So of course, if you go to the fishing festival, you're gonna see some fishing equipment and some fish, but there's no actual fishing involved. So there are no mini games at all, no mini games. There's no cutscenes. It's really just nothing. It's really just a shop. You know, festivals and Story of Seasons, Pioneers of Olive Town might have been a disappointment, but they're a real blast in comparison to the ones in Monster Harvest. And I'm not exaggerating. I'm not kidding. The festivals are really not that enjoyable in Monster Harvest. There's really nothing besides just a little shop. I think it would have been preferable to maybe have a little caravan or stall that comes into town once in a while, rather than getting us excited and hyped up for some festival where there's literally nothing to do. So as with everything else, the festivals are a little bit underwhelming. Oh, actually, on top of the festivals, there's also some special event happening every Friday. If you head to the recreational center on that day, you'll get to participate in the planimal fights, which I guess are kind of like gym battles in Pokemon. I haven't played Pokemon too much, so I'm not 100% sure, but you'll have to beat 3 villagers in a row. They'll typically have 2 planimals each, and at the end, you'll get a treasure with some items as a reward. Once again, this sounds like a great idea. It sounds like a lot of fun, if only the battles were actually fun. So yeah, that's a little extra thing you can do on Friday. The reward is nice. Sometimes you get some ores, but yeah, it's just not that fun. You just try to go to the battles as quickly as you can just to get a reward. And yeah, once again, a little bit underwhelming. Also, one thing I haven't talked about yet, which negatively affected my whole experience with this game, are the bugs. So they did release a day 1 patch that fixed a lot of them. I think they released another patch also. So they've been fixing the bugs, and I'm sure they will fix more in the coming days and weeks. But in this review, I'm sharing my experience, and my experience was buggy. Many times in the dungeon, I was getting completely stuck when entering a new room, and the only thing I could do was exiting the dungeon through the inventory menu. And since you can only enter the dungeon once per night, this would pretty much make me waste my whole night, and I had to wait for the next day before I could go back to the dungeon. I also had this rideable planimal, which looked like a chocobo, which I really liked, by the way. But for some reason, it just kept disappearing and moving to other areas of the world. So sometimes I would just start the day on my farm and my chocobo wouldn't be there. It would be like in the forest north of my farm or in other random places. And I don't know if that's intentional. I don't know if that's a feature or a bug, but it was just kind of annoying having to look for my chocobo all the time. And also, while you can't enter the dungeon with your mount, Well, sometimes I would just walk around the dungeon and my chocobo will be there, like he would just spawn randomly in the dungeon. So once again, not sure if it's a bug or a feature, but it was just a little bit of an odd thing, sometimes a little bit annoying, even though I have to say it was quite useful to have my chocobo in the dungeon, because as I said, when I was going in the dungeon, most of the time I was just trying to run away as fast as I could to avoid the monsters. There were also some minor annoyances, such as having to press multiple times sometimes on the button before my character would get off my chocobo, or trying to harvest a crop that was near a chest, which was completely impossible because my character would just keep trying to open the chest instead of harvesting the crops. So it's just like little details like this that really shows you how the game is not very polished. And I also had the chance to play the game on both Steam and on the Nintendo Switch. And I have to say that on the Switch specifically, navigating the menu felt quite clunky and it took some time getting used to. You can feel that this game was designed with PC in mind, and it looks like consoles were kind of an afterthought. So overall, in terms of bugs, even though they were just kind of annoying for me, I've read some people who had bigger issues, like they couldn't load their save files at all, and other kind of game-breaking bugs. So I know the developers are working on fixes and updates, and the game has been delayed for quite a few months already, so maybe they had some kind of deadline and they couldn't delay it anymore, and they had to release it even without the bugs. So I feel bad for like judging the games too much on this, but this is a review and I'm just giving my experience on the game, and my experience with the game is this so far. So maybe this game in 6 months will be completely different, but so far just keep in mind there are quite a few bugs. So on a more positive note, I want to talk a little bit about the graphics. So when the game was first announced, quite a few people pointed out similarities with Stardew Valley, especially with some of the art assets. And while you can clearly see some inspiration from Stardew Valley's art style, I think that Monster Harvest does a lot to stand out on its own aesthetically. I was really pleased by the art style. The game looks very vibrant and colorful. Also, I really liked how all of the seasons look completely different. There's a huge variety of planimals. They all have very original designs and they all look very nice, and you can see that they clearly put a lot of details and attention to how the game looked. And I also really enjoyed to see how they kind of play with perspective to achieve this kind of 2.5D look. I'm not sure how to describe it, but if you've been watching this video, you can see it by yourself, but it just looks very nice, and I think it's a pretty beautiful game. I also liked seeing my reflection in the water and things like that, so yeah, very beautiful, very pretty. So overall, I think Monster Harvest has great ideas. The way it deals with the day and night cycle is very clever. The unique seasons are such a nice change, and the whole planimal system and procedurally generated dungeon had so much potential. Unfortunately, things were either rushed or poorly executed, or both, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the developers will fix the game in the future. But as it is right now, especially these days when there are so many great farming sim games out there, I would recommend to maybe wait on this one until it goes on sale, or until we know that there's been lots of updates, lots of patches, and problems are fixed, or maybe new features are implemented or something like that. I'm not too sure what's going to be coming in the next weeks and months. So that's my verdict on this game. I have to say I really enjoyed the first few hours of playing the game and discovering all the different planimals and discovering everything that you can do and all the unique systems. But the more you play, the more you realize that there's no incentive to like keep going. There's no rewards that much. Yeah, there's no motivation to really continue playing. So I don't think I'm gonna go back to this game. I played like 1 year in game, and yeah, I don't think I'm gonna go back to this game, but if it's on sale, I might recommend it. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So I'm sorry if this review came off as me just bashing this game. I usually am very positive, but also I'm honest, and my honest thoughts is that yeah, that was my experience with Monster Harvest. So if you want to see more game reviews like this, or if you just want more kind of farming sim content, feel free to click like this video and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out. And I'm gonna see you all in the next video.